them at any point. But I'll do some quick introductions and then we'll get into it. So hi everyone, I'm Brianne Johnson. I'm an environment and development planner at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and I will be leading our event this morning. I'll give a little bit of background. But first, here's a quick overview of our agenda for today. There's also copies on all of the tables if you haven't had a chance to grab that and look it over. Like I said, we'll start with introductions. I'll have a keynote presentation and then 2 panels, and we'll take a break in the middle so y'all can refresh coffees and go to the bathroom and all that good stuff. And then we will also have a catered lunch provided at noon with a lunchtime keynote from the city of Dallas, and we should be done around 1 o'clock. First things first, I want to take a second to thank our workshop sponsors and partners. This workshop was really made possible from a generous donation from the city of Dallas. They provided some funding in conjunction with our North Texas RISE Coalition, which I'll give a little bit more details on in a second. But thank you again to the city of Dallas for that donation. Like I said, I'm from the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We coordinated this event, and we also coordinate the RISE Coalition efforts. And also, this event is in partnership with the State Energy Conservation Office. I'll talk about the work that we do with them in a little bit as well. But we are also receiving a little bit of funding from them to help support this effort. So this event is really an effort from the North Texas Regional Integration of Sustainability Efforts Coalition, or RISE. So RISE is a group of communities from around North Central Texas. We have 9 cost-sharing members currently, communities from various sizes, all the way up from City of Dallas and Fort Worth, down to smaller communities like City of Carrollton and others. So RISE is a coalition of local governments that seeks to engage interested communities in peer exchange opportunities to support sustainability and environmental initiatives. So really, RISE's goals are to align regional partner initiatives, set up peer exchange and networking opportunities between sustainability professionals working for local governments, identify funding opportunities and grants that governments can tap into to support their sustainability and environmental initiatives, provide mentorship to communities that might be new to the sustainability world and trying to write their own sustainability plans. And it also allows us to collaborate on larger regional sustainability projects, such as a regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we are currently working on at the COG in partnership with the RISE Coalition. So coalition membership is open to all COG member communities and local government entities, and you can also are always welcome to participate in our meetings as a non-voting member if you are from the private sector or from a nonprofit and are just interested in learning more about sustainability in North Texas. So each year, as part of our RISE Coalition work plan, our voting members get together and they set a few kind of focus areas that guide all of the efforts of the RISE Coalition for that year. So this year's focus areas are around energy efficiency and resilience, regional emissions, waste reduction and beneficial reuse, and sustainable transportation and air quality. So using these kind of as a framework for the topics that we build all of our events around, the RISE Coalition hosts quarterly meetings, as well as webinars and workshops such as this one on these topics and more in sustainability. And we also just, like I said, try and provide resources to our communities on all things sustainability. And I mentioned briefly before, but our ongoing big project for the past couple years has been a North Texas regional greenhouse gas inventory. So taking stock of all of the emissions that are generated in our region, and also coming up with some emissions reduction strategies toolkits to help communities kind of contextualize where their emissions are coming from by sector, and then some best practices by sector as well on how to maybe reduce those. So that's the work that we do as the RISE Coalition, but we also, here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, have a large ongoing energy management program that is funded by the State Energy Conservation Office. We receive a grant from them on a 1 to 2 year basis. They provide grants to COGS throughout the state to conduct energy planning and management activities. So we put on events and webinars to educate local governments on energy management best practices and all energy efficiency topics, things like that, and also provide some technical assistance to local governments in terms of energy planning and all that good stuff. So that is all I have for introductions. Before we get into our first featured speaker, I just want to check in and see if anyone has any questions about what COG does, what the RISE Coalition is, anything like that. And also, my contact information will be here. Feel free, if you have questions that come up, to contact me. I've also got business cards over by the coffee. But without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce Dr. Margaret Cook from the Houston Advanced Research Center. So Dr. Cook joined HARC as a research associate focusing on the Texas Energy Water Climate Nexus in November 2020. She earned her doctorate in civil engineering from the University of Texas at Austin Cockrell School of Engineering with a certificate in engineering education in 2018. Her research interests include the water energy climate nexus and connections between science and policy. Margaret earned her dual master's degrees in public affairs and environmental and water resources engineering and her Bachelor of Science in civil engineering from UT Austin. She has used her expertise working at the Texas Legislature, the U.S. Department of Energy, Apache Corporation, and Austin Energy. Please help me welcome Dr. Margaret Cook.
Hi, everyone. A bit of a formal introduction, but I'm really excited to be here and to chat with you all today this morning, but also to listen to, there's a lot of really great speakers today, so I'm really excited. I hope y'all are too. Let's get into it. So everybody here, I think, is fully aware that extreme heat is very common in Texas. This is just a picture from AccuWeather of a heat wave. That could be any summer in Texas. That could be any week of the summer in Texas. It's very common. I think in 2011, we had 100 days over 100 degrees in much of Texas. It's just very common. And that means that we are blasting our air conditioning to make it comfortable to live in this state. That also means that our summer bills are so expensive. I don't want to out anybody for how expensive your summer AC bill is, but I'll out one of my neighbors. I think he said it was $900. I told him, get your AC checked. That's really high. So it can get really expensive. That means that it's really expensive for everybody. And if you have if you're a low-income individual, that can be a very high percentage of your take-home income, and that's a really high energy burden. And I'll keep talking about that throughout this presentation, but this is something that makes our electricity in Texas very expensive for specific individuals in particular. And it's also very dangerous. If you can't afford that electricity bill, you might be rationing your energy, reducing how much energy you're using, making your home less safe for you and your family because you can't afford that electricity. That's also a form of energy insecurity. Or you might be rotating which bill you're actually paying so that you can afford your electricity 1 month and your water bill 1 month. And that is also a form of energy insecurity. It puts you at risk of losing electricity in your home. So all of those things are concerns for residents, and they happen year-round, but they especially happen because we are a very hot state. But like I mentioned, they happen year-round. So this is one of a few pictures of the Houston area. I apologize. I know this is North Texas, but I'm from Houston, and a lot of the work that we do is in Houston. And this is a really cool set of maps. So in August 2020, we did a heat mapping exercise for the entire city of Houston, with volunteers, citizen scientists, resident scientists, mapping the temperature around the city in the afternoon and in the evening. So the next graph is the evening. So you can see red means hotter. There are certain parts of the city that are a little bit hotter than others. So not only do we have heat waves, we also have heat that gets trapped in our cities. So this is the afternoon, this is the evening. You can see it's still really hot in those areas, down to 93 degrees, cooled off a whole lot. And here's that difference between those two temperatures. So we have heat waves, and then we have parts of our city that are warmer than others or that don't cool off in the evenings. And a lot of these parts of the city also intersect with where our disadvantaged communities are, if we use the terminology that the Department of Energy uses. So we have parts of the city where folks are dealing with hot temperatures, where it doesn't cool off for them. They're at a disadvantage compared to other parts of the city where it's much cooler up here versus it stays warm down here. Their electricity bills are gonna see that difference of it not cooling down for them. And so, just as a side note, urban tree programs can also work alongside weatherization to help with some of this urban heat as well. But we'll continue talking about weatherization throughout this presentation. And then, of course, we have extreme cold. Again, we know this very well. Y'all know it a little bit better than us in Houston, since it gets a little bit colder up here. But this is a picture from Winter Storm Uri and the outages from Winter Storm Uri. We've also had many other instances where the cold has affected our electricity, and heat waves and cold can both cause those power outages and then make it so folks lose power in their home. And then if the home is uninsulated, it will get in the cold, colder faster, in the extreme heat, warmer faster, and then that becomes unsafe for residents. So we have the issue of high bills from air conditioning. We have the issue of power outages that make our homes unsafe. All things to think about. And then on top of that, this extreme weather, the summer weather that is a constant for us, and then the winter weather that's less common, but can be very dangerous for our grid and cause us to have very high peak electricity, can be a risk for power outages. And so this figure, if we'll get a little wonky, is in the dark color, winter peak demand in ERCOT. And in the summer, this light color, summer peak demand in ERCOT. And we're seeing, even though it's less common to have those winter storms, because we've had them a lot more recently, and because we have more folks using electricity to heat their homes, that demand is starting to get closer, and even in 2021 exceed our summer demand. So we're having to plan for high summer demand and high winter demand now. And that's a risk to our grid, stress on the grid, potential for power outages. On top of that, 44% of our winter peak load is weather sensitive, and 53% of our summer peak load is weather sensitive. So we have those risks of power outage that we have to combat alongside the high bills that folks experience because they're trying to heat their home or cool their home. So more risks to folks. And that's just where we are right now. This presentation isn't all doom and gloom, but it will be for a little while longer because climate change is an issue. So this is my second apology for a Houston-based picture, but this is from our Regional Science Information Network resin application, which is for the upper Texas Gulf Coast, but will eventually be for the rest of Texas. So at one point, we'll be able to present for your area. But for now, for the Houston area, this figure is Regional Climate Pathway RCP 4.5. So that means we have some mitigation. And I'll explain that term in a little bit. And then in this figure, it's no mitigation. So a business as usual, we are acting exactly as we are now, versus we reduce some of the emissions that we have as a society, and that means that we have less climate change. So these are the 2090s. We're comparing no change, some emissions reductions. And what we're seeing is a change in the days of summer that exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So if we reduce some of our emissions, we could see on the coastal counties 2 to 10 extra days of summer with 100 degrees Fahrenheit or more. And then in our more inland counties, which is more of what y'all would experience, that's getting to the 20 to 50 range. And then if we have no mitigation, that's where we get up to another 70 to 80 days above 100 degrees. So that's way more days of summer where folks' electricity bills will be much, much higher. That's if we don't reduce our emissions. And that's just one trend. So we'll see hotter days, warmer nights, more days over 100 degrees, longer summers, longer heat waves, dry days, but more intense precipitation. And this is for the Houston area, but some of these trends are also common for the rest of the state as well. All of these are common for the North Texas area. Harris County in particular is the most at-risk county for climate and weather in the United States, and that's because of the coastal storms that hit it. Also the propensity for drought. We have a little bit of risk for wildfire or winter storm, but then on top of that, it's very high social vulnerability. So where you have high social vulnerability and high climate risk, you get that really intense risk for those, for the impact of storms and the damage that they can have. And all of this type of information, again, is on our Regional Science Information Network that will eventually cover your part of the state. But back to climate mitigation. This figure, again, apologies, from the Houston area. Mitigation helps us stay down here in the level of temperature that we will see increasing in the Houston area. And if we let emissions keep going, that's where we get much, much higher as a trend. And the reason that that's important to keep repeating is that weatherization is a type of climate adaptation. A lot of the things that we do, energy efficiency, all of those things are a type of climate adaptation. They help us prepare for climate change. They help with resilience. They make it easier or safer for us to bounce back from an extreme event. We can do them in our homes, in our community, in our nation. And mitigation is that reducing of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. We have to do both together. And we have to do both together because when we mitigate, we reduce the impact and we make it much easier to adapt. We give us much more time to adapt. And I think that y'all know really well how long it takes your communities to make decisions and how much more time you need to be able to adapt. I am making a joke. I hope you understood. And on top of that, to go back to the point of this presentation, climate change impacts our most vulnerable individuals first. The risks of climate change are most impactful for the folks who have the hardest time to deal with them, who have less disposable income to be able to deal with the effects of climate change, who don't have the disposable income to evacuate or to go to a hotel when their home no longer has power, something of that sort. During Winter Storm Uri, it was particularly impactful for low-income individuals, yes, but also people who are disabled. So definitely something that we have to keep in mind as we do these things is who is affected first. We also know that extreme heat makes other people vulnerable as well. Infants and children up to 4, people over 65, people who are overweight, those who have heart disease or high blood pressure, people who overexert during work or exercise, people who are outside working, are construction workers, for example, and people who have mental illness. So lots of folks are affected by extreme heat. And then on top of that, something that I've been mentioning a few times throughout this presentation, Folks who are low income are also at risk when we have these energy issues. So we have a high energy burden as a risk, energy rationing that I mentioned as a risk, and risk of shutoffs as well. And finally, we have a North Texas picture. You can all be very excited. Thank you. Thank you. So this is the North Texas area. This shows energy burden by census tract as a percent of their income, what their energy bill is. And we can see certain parts of the city in Dallas and Fort Worth, and then our rural areas or less urban areas, also with high energy burden. And these areas tend to intersect where there's high vulnerability. If you look at a social vulnerability map, you will see a lot of intersection between these census tracts and where there's high energy burden. So again, high energy burden, high energy bills, the energy bill is a high percentage of their income. Energy rationing, where residents reduce their consumption so they can reduce their energy bills, not in an energy conservation sense, although there is some overlap, generally in a, I can't afford to turn the air conditioner on right now, even though it would be unsafe for me to leave it off type of way. And then also rotating which bills get paid. And we have a risk of shutoff from that non-payment as well. So on to weatherization, which we have a few experts coming after me to talk about weatherization as well. But weatherization is something that can protect these vulnerable residents. We do energy saving strategies, and that reduces the energy needed to run the home in the same way. If the home is, if they use the same devices, energy rationing would obviously change that, and I'll show a little bit more on that in a second. The upgrade should keep the resident comfortable and safe, and again, adapt homes to climate risk. So this is a Department of Energy figure about the different kind of strategies that could be used in weatherization. We don't necessarily do all of those strategies in a home because we keep things cost effective. But mechanical measures, health and safety measures, building shell, and electric base load are generally the categories that are used. So if the resident doesn't change their behavior, we'll see energy savings because we're doing energy saving strategies in that home. We're insulating, we are air sealing. I'm saying we, the weatherization providers, I do none of this. The weatherization providers are putting insulation in the home, sealing the air, sealing ducts, insulating pipes. The resident, if there's energy savings, they're gonna save money. They're gonna reduce that energy burden. It's not gonna be as big. Their energy bill is not gonna be as big, and it's not gonna be as big of a percent of their income. That also means that we reduce grid stress because there's energy efficiency, we're reducing the total energy demand, and we're gonna reduce emissions because our grid is not 100% renewable, so we're gonna reduce the emissions of those power plants. And I'm going to take a drink. If the resident had been rationing their energy, they can reduce that rationing. They can now use the energy that they need to be safe in their home. There might be little to no energy savings because of that. You might also have residents that change their behavior because now that they're saving energy, they can afford to do things that might be deemed more wasteful. You also see that, and that means that you're not gonna get energy savings from that. What you will get is increased health and safety, which is a very important thing and something that protects vulnerable residents. So Brookings reported that for every $1 invested in weatherization, we get nearly $3 of increased benefits and non-energy related benefits like health and safety. So if we have homes that were covered in snow during Winter Storm Uri, and none of them are weatherized, and they lose power, they get cold very, very fast, and they're unsafe for residents. Versus if we have weatherized homes, insulated, air is sealed, they can stay a little bit warmer, a little bit longer, and keep the residents safer. For an extended power outage like Winter Storm Uri, it's not gonna keep them safe the whole time, but for a short power outage, that can be a very important thing for residents. So I think that there are some folks in here that know weatherization much better than me and can explain this even more. But it's administered by the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, TDHCA, with funding from the Weatherization Assistance Program, from the Department of Energy, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development's LIHEAP program, Low Income Home Energy Assistance. We have local entities that conduct that weatherization as sub-grantees of our grantee, the TDHCA. That might be cities, counties, nonprofits, community action programs, the folks that are speaking in a little bit, our local utilities. Various folks do weatherization activities, and it's local to the area. In 2020, for the entire state of Texas, that was 2,615 dwellings. That is a low number compared to the entire population of the state. And Texas, per capita, is near the bottom for weatherization. Strategies included in our weatherization programs in Texas: we start with a diagnostic assessment. There's an audit of the home to figure out what is needed for weatherization, and whether the home can actually be weatherized. This is where a homeowner would be deferred for maintenance if there's stuff wrong with their home, like it needs repair, something like that. So that's when they decide what kind of upgrades are needed for the home. And then they'll do those upgrades, and this list on the side is the type of upgrades that are commonly done in homes. It's not the full list of things that could be done, but we surveyed, excuse me, one more. It's a little drier in this area than it is in Houston. So we surveyed weatherization providers about what their common strategies are that they do in people's homes. And this is the list that they gave us of what they most commonly do, where the ones that are asterisks, the attic and wall insulation and the air sealing are the most common strategies. What they do in homes must meet a cost effectiveness test. And so that's the National Energy Audit Tool. For most weatherization providers, although utilities might use a different cost effectiveness test. And it does limit what strategies can be employed. We also talked to utilities about what strategies they do and what they would recommend outside of the weatherization programs that they have available. So the most common strategies that they do are the same ones that were on the list before. Very much insulation and air sealing, some water heater wrapping. What they recommend is still the insulation, insulating pipes, building envelope, energy efficient windows, strategies that are on the list before. But I do find it interesting that they, across the board, were recommending gasoline generators, natural gas generators, solar and storage, and a little bit on the propane generator. So things that cannot be included in weatherization right now. But that's something that the utilities recommended for folks that were wanting their homes to be more resilient. We also asked them what limitations exist in their programs, and they told us exactly what I just said on the other slide. When the measures aren't economical per the cost effectiveness methodology, which I believe a generator or solar plus storage would not fit the cost effectiveness methodology, because it's usually more expensive than the entire total of money that we're spending per house, which is about $8,000. So if something's not cost effective, it's not going to be done on the home. We also are limited by what material is available, so supply chain issues recently have been really limiting weatherization programs. And then what the homeowner actually wants in the home will affect what's able to be done. But the reason that the most common strategies are insulation, air sealing, is because if we're going to reduce the electricity use in the home, we want to hit where we're using the most electricity, which is in heating and cooling. And as a side note, if the entire state were to implement the kind of energy efficiency that we're talking about, a little better insulation, better HVAC, more efficient air conditioning, we could see some drastic changes in what our peak electricity demand would be. So this is climate-related simulation of the grid in the year 2050 that we did with the University of Texas. And this right here is what I'll draw your attention to. That summer peak demand changes by 1,000 megawatt hours if we install widespread efficiency. And that's not weatherization per se when we're talking about the weatherization program. But if we're talking about vulnerable Texans and what we can all do to protect vulnerable Texans, and what we can all do to protect ourselves is make our homes more efficient, use the most efficient HVAC technology, insulate our homes. That's good for all of us. It's good for us in each of our homes. But then the less stress that we put on the grid, the less demand that we have, we're going to have less emissions if our grid still uses natural gas or any fossil fuels. And we're going to be less likely to have a power outage, which protects us and all of the vulnerable individuals, because then no one is dealing with a power outage. So just a little bit of extra fun there. So on to weatherization and a little bit more connected to the project that we're working on in the Harris County area. So when we were talking to residents in community meetings about their experiences with the weatherization program, their main complaint was how they felt that the process was very unempathetic for them. That there's a paperwork burden. They gather all of this information about their home. They don't know if they're qualified to do it, but they gather all the information, and then they don't know if they own their home, and so there might be title issues. There might be a renter, and they have to deal with their landlord to be able to get the home weatherized. They might have tax issues. They might not be up to date with their taxes, and then they can't make upgrades to the home. They also don't know if they're going to get rejected by that first audit of the home. So they don't know if their home requires so much maintenance that they'll be rejected from the program and then deferred for maintenance. And then what happens after that is they don't know what's happening. So they are on the list for weatherization, and they wait a long time to be able to get called for the program. And then they get this information of, oh, you don't qualify for whatever reason. And then they don't know what to do to be able to get themselves qualified again. They do have to figure out these things, but they don't necessarily know how. And so they found it very difficult, and they found the process to be so burdensome that it's just not something that they want to do. And if they hadn't gone through it, but their father has gone through it, their neighbor has gone through it, they were the ones that were helping those folks do it, they also don't want to participate in the program either. So there's a known headache with the program. And these aren't residents that were in your area, so I'll note that. They are residents that are in the Houston area, but these are the complaints that they had. And so that's what we're thinking about as we go into this program, is what the resident experience is, and then also what the provider's experience is. So HARC, my organization, and then some partners throughout Texas are aiming to improve the weatherization process in our area of Texas. Our partners are SEER, the Coalition for Equity, Environment, and Resilience, Frontier Energy, Baker Ripley, our local weatherization provider, SPEAR in the Austin area, and TEPRI, who's here. Hi, Andrew. And then we have support from local government and nonprofits. So these are based in Travis and Harris County. So we're back to maps that don't include y'all, I'm sorry. But the blue on these maps is the disadvantaged communities in these areas as determined by the Department of Energy. And then the black hatched area are in the Harris County one, complete communities, which is a program of the mayor, and then certain zip codes in the Travis County area that local folks wanted to focus on, and that intersect between the black hatched area and the blue is where we're focusing in our programs. And it's a 3-year program that we're working on. So our goals are to build an online portal and a community navigator process to connect residents to community resources. We're going to train and employ 10 community navigators as a part of that. We also want to get more homes weatherization ready. Those repair, tax, and title issues that I mentioned. We're going to incorporate climate readiness into weatherization, which includes education and healthy homes training. And overall, we want to increase the homes that are weatherized. So a little bit more information on each of those goals. We want to use a co-production model. And that means working with the cities, the counties, the local nonprofits, and the residents who are who receive the benefits from those programs, as well as you notice that Baker Ripley is our partner, so as well as the weatherization providers in the area. And the goal for that is to understand what the provider's perspective is and what resources they can bring to the table to help residents through those problems and help connect all of those resources so that we can make more homes weatherization ready before they get to the process, or if folks get deferred, get them back into line. There are too many residents that are falling through the cracks that don't feel like they have the resources that they need to be able to get their homes weatherization ready. They feel that process is unempathetic. They don't know what's going on. The community navigators are part of what we're hoping will make that process more empathetic for them. Local folks from their areas of the community that are knowledgeable about what resources are available to them, that can connect folks to what they need to be able to get back into the weatherization line. We also have an eligibility tool to help providers and a weatherization coordination platform, which will be an online version of that community navigator program that helps connect those resources and has a provider side and a resident side. The resident can view the resources, and the providers can help us make sure that their resources are available to residents. And we want to get more homes weatherization ready. That means repairing homes. We have some money to be able to repair homes. We also are connecting to the home repair programs that exist in our area, the nonprofits, the city, the county. And that's to make sure that homes aren't deferred for maintenance. We also want to help folks with their title issues. We didn't need to know who owns the home. Some homes are passed down through family with no will or deed, and so some uncle might own the home, but somebody else lives in it, and they don't actually know where that uncle is, maybe. I'm making things up, but that's the type of problem that we're dealing with, where somebody in the family owns the home, but there's not necessarily a paperwork trail to how they know who owns the home. And then is tax still owed on the home? So helping residents figure out these types of complicated issues and getting the resources they need to be able to sort them out. And we want to incorporate climate readiness into weatherization. Weatherization is obviously something that helps residents adapt to climate, but understanding how that is connected is part of this program as well. Educating providers and residents on how weatherization is connected to climate readiness, making sure it's connected to the existing healthy homes training that's in the area and expanding that training, and then developing with the residents, with the providers, a climate-proof training model that connects weatherization to climate. And then back to this picture, more homes weatherized, meaning when we have extreme weather, when we have power outages, We have residents that are safer, and we want more of those residents to be safer. We think that connecting the resources and connecting with with community ambassadors, and getting into the community to talk to residents about weatherization and about how it can better prepare them for climate will be something that can expand our weatherization program. And we're hoping that that means that we can see an improved quality of life and health of residents, lower energy burden, making our homes healthier, improving energy understanding, and ensuring that we have long-term energy savings associated with our weatherization program, and then train an educated team of community navigators who will continue after our project ends and make sure that the weatherization program is sustainable long-term. And that is my presentation. This is my email when the volume goes away, mcook@harkresearch.org. You're welcome to email me if you want to chat about weatherization or about the resin program or about anything in this presentation. And I can also send you these slides if you like them. And Hark is on social media. You're welcome to follow us there. Thanks.
Okay, this is working. Do you have some, I think now we have a little bit of time for questions. So does anyone have any questions for Margaret? Yes.
So first of all, Dr. Cook, I think that was a great presentation. I'm Farah Andrews with the City of Dallas. Something that you touched on earlier in the presentation, you talked about rationing and then a behavioral change after upgrades were made and conservation. I was wondering if you could expand on that, and I think I didn't process it totally.
Sure. It's pretty common that when we put energy efficiency in our homes, we think that we're going to save energy, but we will also mentally say, oh, I'm going to save energy, so that means I can use a little bit more over here. So that's tends to happen in folks' homes, so that they don't actually save the exact amount of energy that they thought they would. That is not always the case, but it's sometimes the case, so we can't always assume that we're going to get the exact amount of energy savings that we think we're going to get. So that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about energy efficiency. And then energy rationing. When you cannot afford your electricity bill at the level that it would be if you are cooling your home to a safe level in the summer, you might increase your air conditioner temperature. Let's say a safe level would be about 80 degrees. You might go up to 85 to 90 to make sure that your electricity bill does not go so high that it's something you can't afford. That's what I mean by energy rationing. And then if a home is weatherized, it's insulated better. Now you're able to use less energy to cool the home to a safer temperature. That difference, we might see energy efficiency savings if that person was cooling to 75 before, and now they're cooling to 75 now, but the home is insulated. You're going to see a direct difference. That's a big decrease in electricity use. However, if they were cooling to 85, 90 before, now the home is insulated and they're able to cool to 75 because they can afford their electricity bill at that same level that it was before. That's what I mean by, okay, they know what they can spend on energy, and they're going to use energy to the level that they can spend on energy. That's that difference. So you don't know if you're going to get the exact amount of energy savings that you're expecting from installing energy efficiency or weatherization strategies just because you put those in a home, because somebody's behavior might change to compensate for the fact that now they can afford to use a little bit more electricity. Did everybody hear that? Okay, just making sure. I'm so soft-spoken, it's a very good thing that I have a microphone.
Thanks, Brian. So our region, we're a little over 8 million people right now, which equates to, if you use that 3.1 something people per household, it's about 2.5 million houses here just in our region of the state. You mentioned a program that supports weatherization upgrades for a little over 2,000 homes. Is that in the state?
In the state. That's what we did in 2020 in the state. That's what was reported to the Texas legislature.
So are there other programs that aren't being cited here that assist low-income individuals that you're aware of within the state of Texas and with this issue? Beyond the 2,800 or 2,000?
Your panel will address that.
Okay, so the panel will address that, so you'll get your answers in a little bit. But generally, there are weatherization programs at the utility and at those sub-grantee levels that are that report to the legislature their activities, and that's what's recorded in that number. There are nonprofits that help with energy assistance, that help with home repair, that do some energy efficiency activities. So you'll see some like weather stripping activity, that type of thing, but nothing to the level of the significance of the weatherization programs. We're not seeing a whole lot of efforts that are at that level where it's a whole home upgrade. That's not as common to my knowledge, but feel free to correct me. I don't remember what I was going to say, but the panel will elaborate on that.
So I saw something interesting on one of your slides. It looks like there was, looks like you kind of monetized the health benefits of weatherization. Can you talk a little bit about how that happens? I know it's a little more transparent, the energy savings and the dollars saved and the energy burden, but like the health benefits in that conversation tend to be a little harder to communicate.
Sure, that's not my number. That's a number that I pulled from a Brookings Institute report. But generally, they would monetize reductions in asthma levels, childhood asthma in particular. When you're making a home safer, when you're reducing gas leaks, when you're reducing the propensity for mold, that tends to improve respiratory issues in particular. So that's generally where we see very high health benefits. And because the energy efficiency savings aren't as cut and dry as, you know, we're going to improve and we're going to see this exact savings and that's going to mean this much energy dollar amount savings, that's not as linear as we'd like it to be. We do see a lot more benefits on the health and safety side. And so that tends to be where we want to put that monetary value. And I did remember what I was going to say. So there are programs throughout the state that are a little bit more active than others. So there are programs in parts of the state that aren't using their entire allocation of funding from the state government to be able to do all of their weatherization. And then there are programs that have their allocation, are using that entire allocation, but they have a large population in their area. And so there's much more demand for weatherization, but they're not able to weatherize too many more homes because there's only so much activity you can do. So that tends to be what the limit is.
You mentioned the survey that you did about some of the barriers that participants were identifying with the weatherization programs. Did you have anyone that identified a lot of these programs are set up to be reimbursement programs? Did any of the recipients talk about that that's a barrier, especially for low-income residents, to have to pay for the weatherization expense up front and then have a reimbursement type program for that expense?
That's not something that they identified and not something that is the case for our area. So the weatherization provider in our area does the weatherization with contractors. They do the work. One barrier that I did not include is the fact that they have to leave their home for this repair, and that stay outside of their home is not covered through the weatherization program, and that can be an expense for the families, at least one that our residents did mention. I'm not aware of programs where they have to reimburse for that. So I might talk to you later about those programs.
So when you were identifying, or when you were speaking to residents about perceived barriers to increasing weatherization in their homes, how did you identify residents for outreach? Were they all residents that had either applied or participated in weatherization programs before, or did you outreach to residents who had maybe heard about the program but hadn't applied because of those barriers? How did you find folks?
A little bit of both. So we were in community meetings that weren't necessarily about weatherization in the first place. We just have community meetings that are about climate justice and solar energy and about home repair in general, and weatherization is a topic that came up. So it wasn't a formal focus group type process, but it was community meetings where they were essentially venting sessions about these are the issues that we have, and that is what turned into the Community Navigator program. So this was an idea that came from the residents themselves and what their issues were and how they wanted to solve it. So venting sessions.
Questions for Margaret? Okay, great. Thank you again so much for your time and for speaking to us this morning. All right, we've got about 5 minutes until our next panel, so feel free to top up your coffee or water, run to the bathroom, and we'll meet again in here in 5 minutes for our panel on weatherization assistance programs. So our moderator for this panel is Catherine Barnett. She is our RISE Coalition Chair and also the Sustainability Manager for the City of Denton, and I will let Kat introduce our panelists. But if our panelists want to come up and take a seat.
Okay. Okay, is everyone back? I think we're pretty good. So for our first panel today, we have 4 folks here representing different parts of the Metroplex. We have Bree Boyd, Energy Assistant Supervisor at Atmos. Bree, you want to wave at everyone? There we go. So Atmos is the country's largest natural gas-only distributor. For the past 5 years, she has led Atmos Energy's income qualified programs across the state. She has a bachelor's degree in advertising and a Master of Arts in Mass Communication, both from Texas Tech University. We also have Carl Brown, Senior Lead on Residential Energy Efficiency Programs at Encore Electric Delivery, Texas' largest energy delivery company. Carl has over 20 years of experience in residential energy marketing and assistance at both Encore and TXU, and he holds a Bachelor's of Business from the University of North Texas. We talked about Denton earlier. So we have Amy Connolly, the Assistant Director of Neighborhood Services for the City of Fort Worth. Amy has 25 years of experience in planning and community development for municipalities, nonprofits, and consulting firms across the country. She has her bachelor's in political science and a master's in regional and community planning from Kansas State University. We have a lot of tenured folks up here. And we have Bradley Manning. Bradley is a seasoned nonprofit professional celebrating his 33rd year serving the public as a Texas CPA, and for the past 17 years, he has focused his energy on the nonprofit sector of business, working as the executive director for Texas Neighborhood Services, nonprofit providing utility and rental assistance to 8 counties in north central Texas. So thank you to all of our panel for being here. And I want each of you to explain a little bit about some of the programs you're working on right now, just a couple of minutes, so we don't just dive into questions. Let's talk about what you're working on.
Sure. I'm Amy Connolly. I work at the City of Fort Worth in Neighborhood Services. Our Neighborhood Services has a division that just handles our various rehab programs. So we do have a weatherization program that uses funding from Department of Energy, from TACA, and the LIHEAP program. We bundle those together along with our lead safe program that we run. We can go into a house, remove lead, and do weatherization. We also have a priority repair program that is probably our biggest program, and that's where we do major system repairs on houses in Fort Worth. These are all serving low-income households, so those are the primary programs that we use. We also have Community Action Partners that is part of the City of Fort Worth. It's another division in Neighborhood Services, and they do utility assistance programs to sort of help with utility bills, water bills, those sorts of programs. So those are just some of the programs that we do in Neighborhood Services, but having a lot of the rehab programs allows us to match the money and make the money go further. So we can take TACA money, DOE money, LIHEAP money, put that all together into one house. We can match it up with our priority repair program. So it really helps us address the housing stock in Fort Worth, keep what we call naturally occurring affordable housing in Fort Worth, because there's a lot of folks that are living in housing and they can't afford upkeep on it, so it continues to dilapidate. But if we can keep people in their houses longer, not only helps that family, but it also helps the housing stock in Fort Worth stay strong. And so that's what we look to do. Our weatherization programs, most of them actually serve Tarrant County. So we're covering Tarrant County with our weatherization programs. So about 2.1 million people served.
Hi, I'm Bree Boyd. I'm the Energy Assistance Supervisor of the Energy Assistance Department at Atmos Energy. So our team oversees our Sharing the Warmth program, which is a bill assistance program, as well as the Keeping the Warmth program, which is our low-income weatherization program. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. We also have some other energy efficiency programs at Atmos Energy for rebates. For commercial, residential, and multifamily households, they can take advantage of those high-efficiency rebate programs, as well as you can request free weatherization kits from us as well, and we kind of help oversee that as well. And that's about it for me.
Good morning, everyone. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce my colleague Joanna Gomez over to my left. She is the manager of all of our low-income programs and joined me today. So if y'all have questions, she's available. We also have brought brochures that we hand out to our customers. They're over on the coffee bar. Feel free to grab those with our business card. As y'all may or may not know, Encore is the largest investor-owned utility in Texas. We have by far the largest budget is dedicated to energy efficiency, whether it be on the commercial side, but for today's topics, it's residential and weatherization, where we do focus on normal, regular single-family and multifamily dwellings, as well as income qualified or low-income qualified residents, both multifamily and single-family, focusing on weatherization, HVAC replacement, tightening of the envelope of the property, and so forth. One of the things that we do with this weatherization money is distribute it through third-party organizations who then distribute it through the TDHCA subrecipients across our service area, and they're allowed to, through that program, spend up to $6,500 of utility funding to upgrade the efficiency of that house. And it's a benefit because they're also able to use other funding sources, whether it be LIHEAP or other WAP funding with that, to be comprehensive with those homes, address minor repair issues as well as the efficiency. No kidding aside, we are focusing on the electric reduction of the home. Sorry, Atmos. But it is in an overall effort, we're mandated as a utility to reduce the overall load on the grid. And so what we found over the years is, raise your hand, anyone that wants a bigger or more power lines in your neighborhood. I don't see any hands. So with that being said, we do have a concerted effort each year and are actually mandated to reduce our load on the grid by 10% based on a growth factor of our service area. So with that being said, it is a concerted effort that our company does each year to reduce the load that is on the grid so that it hasn't having to have further improvements or expansion to support that growth that we have in the area. I could keep talking, but I don't want to take Brad, so here you go.
Oh, feel free. So I'm Brad Manning. I run a community action agency just to the west of Fort Worth. So basically our agency would do what Amy does plus what the neighborhood services part of the city of Weatherford does. We take a little bit of a non-conventional approach to weatherization. It's a component of trying to help the individual get out, find a way out of poverty. And sometimes that's about removing barriers, whatever the barriers are to poverty. Dr. Cook, I just got to give a shout out to you. Your speech was dead on. You hit a lot of the big areas, especially when you were talking about income. This year we have found, at least within our organization, people are having to make a choice. They're having to choose 1 month rent, between rent, utilities, between food, and between transportation. We're a somewhat rural area, because we're the 7 counties to the west. So basically, you leave Tarrant County, you get into Parker, Wise, Johnson, and you go west all the way out to Stephenville, Eastland. So we go everywhere, from basically a feeder city right next to Tarrant County out to dairy farms. So we got a very wide breadth of clientele. A couple of things I want to bring up though from our research. As I said, we're non-conventional when it comes to weatherization, and what I mean by that is we chose to relinquish our true weatherization program in 2012. In 2009, 10, and 11, for those of you that were around, there was an act from the federal government called ARA, and it was I can't remember what ARA stood for. The Reinvestment Recovery Act, thank you. Well, one of the components of the American Reinvestment Recovery Act that President Obama put in was he wanted to see 1 million homes weatherized. And that was something that, and that was nationwide, and we got there. But what we did in the state of Texas was we did a lot of weatherization of homes during those 3 years. But the weatherization program has a component that says that once you weatherize a home, you have 15 years before you can weatherize it again. And so let's say that if for homes that were weatherized in 2010, That's 2025. This is 2023. We've got 2 more years. And 15 years is a long time, especially if you look at the technology that's happened in the heating and air conditioning systems. So what we made the decision to voluntarily let our weatherization program go back. There's 41 agencies in the state of Texas that provide utility assistance through government funds, through Health and Human Services, that come through the state of Texas. There's 21 weatherization providers. And that's simply because it's more efficient for the state to have fewer weatherization providers where they can bundle, because the weatherization program after ARA became very, very technical, very complex. I think you mentioned some of the complexities and some of the barriers. You know, there's a need audit that's, you know, that requires, there's a lot of things that are in there that make running a weatherization, you've got to be experts at it to run it. And as a community action agency, we saw other needs that became more important, that being one of affordable housing and transportation. And that's because of the area that we're in. You know, every area is different. But we did come up with some unique ways of handling weatherization that I'll share with you guys when my turn comes around to talk again. Hard to address a weatherization effort when Winter Storm Uri has created a situation now that your utility bills are up $200 or $300 a month, simply because if your provider was purchasing their electricity during 2001, and I'm going to name a name, and it's in a bankruptcy case, so I'm not saying anything, but they bought it under Brazos Valley Co-op. All the co-ops that bought under Brazos Valley are all, the bankruptcy judge has assessed a fee that has increased their utility bills a couple $100 a month, which comes in as an energy usage cost, and so what that has done is that has increased the individual bills, also increased the amount of people that are at risk of disconnection, and has really changed the focus less from conservation and trying to save money to trying to keep the lights on and trying to keep people in their homes. It goes right back. It's still health benefits, but the health benefits change because of those circumstances.
Well, at Encore, we are stewards of ratepayer funding. In other words, if you're an Encore customer, meaning you have an Encore meter on your house, then you pay into the funding for these programs that we are the managers of, or the stewards of. With that being said, our budgets have actually increased, and so we do focus more efforts on not only weatherization, but HVAC and overall energy reduction for the homeowner, the renter, and the multifamily properties. With that being said, the focus that we have on weatherization, our biggest challenge is finding qualified contractors that will go and do the actual work. It's certainly viable, and it's something that's worthwhile in doing. Again, our biggest challenges are pointing out to the customer that our incentive, which we always use the word incentive rather than rebate, because we're incenting the customer's decision to make a choice to be more energy efficient. With that being said, the incentives that we provide will typically offset a customer's out-of-pocket cost, depending on the program they participate in, anywhere between 30% up to 70 or 80%. So there's a big difference there. And so if I'm talking to the average customer, whether they be income qualified or not, we have to do a value equation with them that explains the benefits of upgrading the insulation or weatherizing the home, and the fact that, okay, this may cost X out of your pocket, including the Encore incentive, but here's the benefit that you're going to get over the life of the improvement. And so with that being said, that's the utilities' biggest challenge, is proving the worth to the customer that it is a viable upgrade for them to consider this. Our other big challenge, and it's part of the legislation that was passed over 20 years ago when deregulation hit the state of Texas, is utilities are very, very limited in how we can promote and educate and advertise these programs. They're the best kept secret in the marketplace. We have a website, but raise your hand if you've ever been to the Encore website. Okay, I'm impressed. Well, other than to report an outage, okay? But with that being said, it is kind of a uphill battle for our utility programs to get that word out to the marketplace, and then to present that value equation to the prospective person that's including it. The good news is you do not, I hate the word discriminate, but you can be a renter and fully participate in the program as long as your landlord knows that they agree. In other words, it's their house, so you're actually helping that person, and we base the income or the qualification of that household on the tenant, not the owner. Okay, so that's a big help with that particular question, and how the participating resident can participate with our program.
So in the past year, our Keeping the Warmth program, which is our low-income weatherization program, it helps with the attic ceiling, duct ceiling, weather stripping, insulation, appliance repair and replacement, as well as occasionally gas pipeline repairs. We've seen an increase in funding for that program, as well as an increase in the maximum amount agencies are able to spend in the household. We have seen an increase due to inflation costs, supply chain issues as well. So we did try to make that a little easier for them. We've also added 2 agencies in the past year to help broaden our reach, and we currently partner with 13 agencies across our Mid-Tex division. And so we're just ensuring we can do everything that we can to make it easier on our agencies, get more done in each household with those increasing costs, as well as communicating that out to customers. We have all the information about our programs on our websites, how they can find an agency that serves their area, as well as we try to post the information on social media, put it on our bills, as just a couple of ways, finding more touch points to get our customers aware that the program exists and that it's real, and that they can get assistance. I think that is something I hear a lot, especially from seniors. It sounds a little bit too good to be true, and so they don't always trust that it's a real thing and it comes at no cost to them. So we also speak at assistance events where they can see us and ask any questions they may have, and that's just a few ways we've been trying to increase that.
So when Uri hit, the biggest issue for Fort Worth low-income homeowners wasn't actually HVAC, it was busted pipes. And so we had to launch a very quick program where we dealt with pipe issues in low-income individuals' homes, and we were sort of working hand in hand with FEMA on that. And out of that came some CDBG DR funding that's being allocated to City of Fort Worth. And so we'll probably be looking for some methodologies like weatherization and pipe insulation, things like that, to weatherproof some of our houses. But that was primarily what came out of Erie. I will say that one thing that has happened since 2019 or so is that inflation of materials, inflation in terms of cost of contractors, inflation in terms of staff salaries to run these programs has really cut into the amount of people that we can serve. So whereas, in prior years, 2019, 2020, we were able to serve 250 households, we're now, under 200, we're at like 177, 175, just because the cost of materials, the inability to get things like windows, the staff costs rising closer to the rate of inflation, and our funding remaining stable, if not declining. So that's one of the issues that we're kind of running up against.
Absolutely. Our vulnerable population, or who we define as a vulnerable population, is households where the family is age 60 or over, or it's single mothers with children under the age of 5. And typically that has been a demographic that we have tried to focus on. However, I will say that since last year, the population of those that are in the service industry, maybe working a minimum job wage, or working fast food, working something that's paying a six-figure salary. That demographic, that income demographic, has exploded for needing assistance for us. Simply, and that is simply an economic issue. That's really not a weatherization issue, but that's been a huge impact. Just the whole inflation. Not only has inflation increased the number of people that we need to see, it has increased the cost. I'll give you an example. Last year we spent right at, in our 8 counties, we spent right at $4.5 million. Today is March the 1st, and we have spent, just for 2023, we just broke the $2 million barrier in 2 months. And within the first 2 weeks of the year, we had over 1,700 applications in-house ready to be worked, where that time last year we had maybe 300. And and it's hard because so many of these that are coming in that are in this marginal area that have had that income, where they've had to make income choices, are living in a world that is tough. I mean, and they're coming in with disconnection notices. Well, our state regulations say the disconnection notices they get moved to the top of the list because you're trying to keep people in without losing their power. But it's a tough world.
Well, and to add to what Brad just said, we're noticing a huge demographic of multifamily participation, as well as the need in the multifamily world. So many times these customers that we have don't have the same advantages or the same way to take advantage of these programs because they are under a tenant situation, meaning I can't individually impact my particular apartment. So what we've done is focused programs specifically for apartment owners, apartment management companies, as well as other outlets to appeal to this market segment to go in and weatherize the entire apartment complex. That's the sealing of the windows, plumbing penetrations, door weather stripping, insulation in the attic. Then you turn around and we have a huge response of all of these apartments that are not necessarily in the urban areas, they are, but throughout our service area that were built in the 80s, and they were all built all electric. Sorry, but they're huge power centers, if you will, and so we can go in. We have a program that is specifically designed to replace electric resistance heat with with the high efficiency heat pumps, and now we're getting the benefit of load reduction not only in the summertime but in the winter time, i.e. the time when we had the extreme temperatures. So highly effective programs. I'll steal Joanna's thunder. She's also managing a program where we have a retail products where any customer, it doesn't matter if you're multifamily or single family, can go and get various energy efficient products through a retail portal, if you will, that Encore sponsors, and we provide discounts / incentives or point of purchase discounts for various energy efficient equipment that a customer can use at their particular location, and it's been highly effective.
So we actually let our partner agencies determine eligibility and where they're going and the homes they're weatherizing based on the community's need. But we historically have seen a large number of homes that are in older neighborhoods or just older homes in general, needing quite a bit of weatherization assistance. I do think a trend we kind of see along with that is with those increasing costs, it's taking a lot more to get things done in the home and actually make the home whole. And so I think an important conversation would be how we can braid all of the different funding sources available to make sure that we are able to get the home whole, get all of those measures in. And also we do see quite a few elderly and the disabled taking advantage of our programs. And you know, that I would say is probably about at least half would be the elderly in what we see.
Yeah, I think if you were to take a map of Fort Worth and map out, there's a couple overlapping maps that show where we're serving. If you look at the populations of the most distressed neighborhoods in Fort Worth, if you look at former redlining, if you look at, what else? Just any indication of neighborhood distress, and you show where we're serving populations, they certainly overlap tremendously. So we get about 300 to 400 applications a year. We can serve about half of them, and we have a priority point system that we assign to see who gets served first. So if you're elderly, disabled, you have a house with children under 5, if you have a high energy burden, then you rate higher and get a higher score. And so that's how we do it. And I think that's aligned with a lot of the other programs that are running. And so we do that. We have an online application that you can actually apply on your phone and upload, photos of documents that you need. We have people in the office that will come to your house and help you fill out applications if you need it. But of the applicants that receive, maybe half of them can get served. So that's always disappointing for us because we know that we could produce a lot more energy efficient houses if we had more funding. But our demographics certainly overlap what you would think of in terms of neighborhood and community distress, that those are the same neighborhoods that we're serving with almost all of our rehabilitation programs. And we do take advantage. We love the multifamily program that we have. It's a great program. We have established our program by looking at the TDHCA's list of low-income housing tax credit developments. We try to pick the ones that are somewhere between 15 and 20 years old, and then we go to those apartment complexes and work with the ownership to say, you know, look, you're 15 years old now. Can we partner with you to help replace HVAC units and reduce, you know, energy load for residents? And they've been, you know, almost uniformly really happy to receive that assistance. And so, you know, I think that's been a really good program for us. We love it. It's easier for us to do in one location to, you know, to take out 100, 120 apartments at one time. It goes a lot quicker, and you know, those residents are often most vulnerable, and so they see a big reduction in energy costs for themselves. So it's a good thing.
We're taking multiple funding streams, wrapping them together to provide that service. It's a great thing. And these two partners right here, I mean, I can't say enough wonderful things about them, because they're great partners to work with us to be able to provide that service.
And the utility funds really help distribute dollars from federal funds. Any publishing already, Jim?
So I'll say this: the federal with the federal dollars, you know, there's 37.5 million homes that need to be weatherized nationally. There's enough money. You know, I think we did 2,600 in Texas last year. There's enough to do, you know, maybe about a little less than 1%. But you know, you couldn't even do those justice if you didn't have these other two partners to provide that you know, through the weatherization portal. We actually do something, if I can have 2 seconds, we actually do something rather unique. Instead of going through the weatherization, instead of going through the need audit and going through all of those hoops that the state has, with the LIHEAP program that they have, our utility assistance program has a heating and cooling element for that vulnerable population that I was telling you about. And what we do is we will take some of our utility assistance money when we get a home that you know is needing this. We'll send somebody out. We don't have to go through all the red tape. But I will tell you that only addresses the heating and air conditioning component. But if you'll remember one of Dr. Cook's slides, that was one of the most expensive elements that's out there. You know, but you can fix the heating and cooling, but if you can't address at least some of the insulation issues, you're going to get limited benefits. Well, with our electric providers, especially with some of our co-ops, they do something called, they all call them different names, but basically, let's say your bill ends in 19 cents, they'll give you the ability to round it up to the next dollar, and they'll take those funds and apply them to help low income. And we get a lot of those dollars. Those dollars are actually, we're able to use to help with that insulation component. And I just got to give Bree a shout out, because our homes that have gas heating, you know, Atmos Energy provides us funds to be able to do that. So, like I said, we're not a traditional weatherization provider, but we still get the job done.
Well, and I guess I can add to one of the things that Encore does. We have a very large voice with the Public Utility Commission, who oversees our programs. We're currently working with them to look at other opportunities to not necessarily go away from these need audits, but to establish what we're coining as a priority list. A much more simpler, easier way to assess a home or a property, and then typically still using the hierarchy of where's your best bang for your buck, and go from that approach. And we're getting some traction in Austin, so cross your fingers that we can be successful in helping to refine some of these processes that are mired with the red tape.
Well, so there's a couple different sources. I believe that's Likey for the multifamily program. Yeah, so that is the Encore program. We're really trying to go into those multifamily units and replace the traditional electric units that are sort of like coils that the heat blows over with the heat pump systems, which are a lot more energy efficient. And so that's the primary of that program. There's usually some insulation that happens, some sealing that happens, but on a multifamily you don't have to really do as much as you do with a single family home. So it's a really good program. I really like that. And what I'm trying to do is get our affordable housing development sort of in the idea that we can commingle some of these programs. And when they get to year 15, sometimes they are getting on the market to sell, but having a weatherized, fully functioning system makes it better for them to sell that unit. So it's kind of a win-win on that for them. Oh, goodness.
So when you replace the HVAC system, are you monitoring the usage afterwards, or
I don't believe that we're required to monitor the usage afterwards. I mean, we hear anecdotally, how people are using the systems. I mean, a lot of these systems that we're replacing in single-family homes, for example, are very old and outdated. They're way past their useful life. And one feedback we do hear is that people aren't used to the heat pump and the way they're used to really hot air blowing out of their HVAC systems and not sort of the heat pump, which is a little bit different. It's more of a conditioning system. It takes a little longer to heat up. It's not the same as the old units. And so we have to sometimes give some training to folks to say, well, this isn't your mother's air conditioner. This is a different this is a different heater. It works a little differently. So, but I don't believe we monitor. It's not a program we monitor.
We've tried. I've recently. Did you know Randy?
Who's Randy?
Right. Well, Randy Beard used to be at Atmos before he retired. We tried many times, to be honest with you. Short answer: the challenge that we have, especially on the electric side, is we have to be careful about fuel switching, and we can't be one of these that endorse fuel switching. Okay, so that's our biggest hurdle. To go back to your question, we have incentives for radiant barrier, insulation, wall insulation, floor insulation, whether it's sprayed in, blown in. So we cover the spectrum of insulation. It's pick your poison, right? Um, the biggest challenge again we have is all of our funding is based on ratepayer funding to reduce electric load. And so when you're trying to intermingle that with your other utilities, whether it be water, gas, or whomever, that's where you have to be careful that you don't subsidize other savings, even though it's in the long run it helps the customer. It is. The grid is just like your highway, okay? And there's congested areas and there's areas that aren't. So not only are you addressing these high concentrated urban areas, but you're also addressing the growth areas. You know, look at what has happened north of here that wasn't here 10 years ago. And even in Brad's,
it's moving west now.
Exactly, and so you have these constant restraints where the line used to serve 100 houses, and now they're putting in a 300 house subdivision. That's why we have a new homes program that focuses on above code compliance and providing incentives for those builders and developers to be above code. Let's at least start off that way. Sadly, the multifamily, we can't, I say we, that the logic in most multifamily new construction, and if you drove here today, you saw multifamily going up everywhere. They still have the mindset of, I would rather have granite countertops than a more efficient HVAC system, and they're still putting in the cheapest, least efficient system, which happens to be electric resistance heat, typically because the gas is not available, or they would use that. So it's a challenge.
I want to address one last thing too. You mentioned, we were talking about multifamily. Well, there's a big difference between multifamily and affordable housing, because there is lots of multifamily going in. But as far as for the low income, trying to find affordable housing, it's a completely different animal.
So we did talk a little bit earlier, mentioned you kind of have to be a pro at weatherization to run some of these federal programs. So we do partner with quite a few of the LIHEAP and WAP agencies who are already receiving those funds. It also kind of helps with the grading as well. And so it is a bit of a barrier to find agencies who are able to do all of the work. It takes contractors that actually know what they're doing, and for the assessments as well. And so we always try to find agencies that already have a program in place. We do take on some that don't, but it just tends to be a bit easier and makes a little more sense if they already have a program.
So if it's a tax credit program through TDHCA, that actually takes care of that particular issue. That's not anything that we have to really worry about or address, because the amount of that available of that housing is really driven by that tax credit. If it's not tax credit, we still are seeing, even if we do go in and put an HVAC unit in with, and the landlord signs off of it, a lot of times what we're doing is we're getting an agreement with them that they won't raise rates for 2 years. Now, I know weatherization, to get a rental unit weatherized, there is some, and I'll let my counterpart Amy down here to talk about that. I know that there's some limits there, but we try to mimic those as much as possible.
Yeah, we're going after apartment complexes that are usually have a tax credit associated with it, and a land use restriction that would say it has to be affordable for 30 years or more. And so, it's easiest for us because it's a 4% tax credit deal, for example. Maybe a majority of the units are 60 below AMI or below, so it's a very easy way for us to do that. But there are times when we do what we would call naturally occurring affordable housing, and they just, I don't know that there's any agreement that they have to sign, but you can rest assured that the majority of the residents are qualified as low income, and it's unlikely that it would sell in any type of, it's going to make, it's probably going to remain affordable housing.
The short answer is we're always looking for partners to educate customers and looking for opportunities to spread the good word, so to speak. Encore doesn't provide a bill. That's one of our problems. So we don't provide energy assistance per se, because the customer pays their bill through a retail electric provider, which a portion of the bill comes back to us for the transmission and distribution fees. But I'm not sure I fully understand your question. Did that address what you're asking? Be sure and get one of my cards over there, and you can call me directly and we can continue the conversation.
I think it's time for a break. Right, Brianne? Yeah, so they're going a little bit over on the panel, and I want to make sure that everyone has enough time to think about what they're talking about. So we will start our next panel at 11. So we've got about 7 or 8 minutes break.
Thank you all so much. Welcome back, everyone. We'll get started with our second panel. This is on the topic of weatherization benefits to communities and the environment, as well as we'll tackle some policy issues as well. Our moderator for this panel is Mendy White. She is the vice chair of our RISE Coalition and the sustainability manager for the city of Louisville.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to start out by introducing our panelists. I'll give a brief bio for each one, and then just like Kat did, I'll give each one of you the opportunity to give us a brief synopsis of what you've been working on or your main projects or interests with your professional goals right now. So to start off with, next to me I have Alan Hoffman. Alan is the founder of Hoffman Homes, a sustainable builder of single-family homes. He holds the professional designations of Certified Graduate Builder and Certified Green Professional from the National Association of Home Builders. His company designed and built the first 2 homes to be certified by the U.S. Green Building Lead for Homes program. Alan also serves on the City of Dallas's Environmental Commission's technical panel as a buildings expert. And then next to Alan, we have Andrew Robison. Sorry. And he is a research analyst with the Texas Energy Poverty Research Institute. Andrew's work at TEPRI seeks to advance equitable solutions for affordable, reliable, and clean energy in underserved communities throughout the state. Andrew holds a bachelor's in business administration from the University of Georgia and a master's in global policy studies with a specialization in energy and environmental policy from the LBJ School of Public Affairs in Austin. That is a mouthful. Then next to Andrew, we have Eva Chaki. And Dr. Eva Chaki is the executive director of the Hunt Institute for Engineering and Humanity at SMU and the co-founder of the Inclusive Economy Consortium. Her work leverages transformational technologies, innovative financial mechanisms, and social entrepreneurial approaches for climate-smart and inclusive economic development. She has an MS in finance from George Washington University and a PhD in public policy with a specialization in globalization and development from Duke University. And last but not least, we have Julie Hiramoto, FAIA. She harnesses the built environment's power as a positive force to heal seemingly intractable social challenges. That is a great sentence. I love that. She transforms architectural practice to embrace a regenerative and evidence-based future while fostering equity and human health as an HKS principal and firm-wide director of integration. Her advocacy efforts include congressional testimony on energy efficiency, fuel source, and the market's ability to innovate, representing 95,000 American Institute of Architects members in their first delegation to the United Nations Annual Climate Conference, COP26, in Glasgow, Scotland, and as the mayor's appointee to the Dallas Environmental Commission. So thank you, all of you, for coming to serve on this panel today. So coming down the line, starting with Alan, I'd like you to just say a brief sentence or two about what you've been working on lately.
We're developing a few communities in Dallas that are focused on DOE certification under the Net Zero Ready program. And we completed a net zero home in our 8-home community, which is an infill project. We're primarily doing infill developments in the city of Dallas, but we also build around the North Texas area.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Again, I'm with the Texas Energy Poverty Research Institute. We're a nonprofit based in Austin, but we have a statewide focus. In order to sort of forward our mission of exploring affordable, reliable, and clean energy sources for low-income and underserved Texans, we kind of take on a number of different approaches. The first being research. So we're currently in the process of launching a statewide survey of low-income communities to better understand energy-related issues and how they relate to low-income communities, and also perspectives on things like clean energy and access to resources among low-income communities across the state. So stay tuned for the research that we will publish on that statewide survey that's currently ongoing. The second sort of bigger area that we focus on is convening. So we like to bring together all sorts of different voices across the state to ensure that all voices in the energy sphere are heard, and that multiple stakeholders can forward their objectives and get to know each other and break down some of those silos that currently exist among energy providers across the state. And then sort of the third area that we focus on is pilot projects. So in addition to the work that Margaret mentioned that we do with HARC, we are also in the process of exploring sort of like cutting edge energy solutions that might be of benefit to low income communities, things like virtual power plants, community solar, and other sort of like breaking technologies, and trying to also ensure that as we transition to different sources of energy generation, low income and underserved communities also receive the benefit of that. So thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Eva Chaki, and institutionally as the Hunt Institute, I'm the executive director of the Hunt Institute for Engineering and Humanity. And the institute at SMU is a hub for climate smart and inclusive economic development. Energy efficiency is one of the most important areas within that space, because energy efficiency doesn't just have the obvious environmental benefits, but has the opportunity to significantly improve livelihoods and create decent jobs. So that's the angle from which we approach it very systemically. Personally, in my previous life before moving to Dallas, I spent 20 years at the World Bank. I led the energy efficiency efforts there starting 1996. So I've been looking at this space for a while. I have worked on energy efficiency around the world. There is a lot of international experience and evidence that one can look at and learn from and leverage. And my focus has very much been on scaling. Like it was mentioned earlier, it's actually a universal issue. We have demand and supply side problems. We have very serious constraints in terms of how much we can do with grant monies and subsidies. So we need to get to the point where we can leverage capital markets. And we have done this internationally. We have scaled programs very quickly to hundreds of millions of dollars. And hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about some of these, because I believe that in order to fully exploit the benefits of energy efficiency for all involved, we need to be able to get to that point, and we do have the toolbox for it.
Hi, my name is Julie, and as Mindy mentioned, I'm with HKS. We are a multidisciplinary global design services firm with our headquarters in downtown Dallas. So delighted to be here today. I think weatherization is such an important topic. It is critical to our energy performance and getting our carbon under control. And it's also not technically overly complicated and really affordable. So I think that's, like the first rung in the ladder of the things that we need to tackle together. And as an architect, I think if there's one thing that you leave with today, kind of registering and what I hope to share with you, is that leverage the architects in your communities to help you think through these complex challenges. We are trained in school as design thinkers and multidisciplinary kind of integrators of thought to just solve complex problems. So don't think, oh, I can't pick up the phone and call an architect because I don't have a building to design. We look at all of the built environment, we look at existing buildings, and we look at placemaking too, and how all of that comes together.
Thank you very much. To start out with, I'd like to hear from each of you, from your perspectives, how does weatherization support sustainable, resilient communities?
Sustainability involves our grid and our supply, our energy supply, and the air quality in our region. So, to generate our power, we're burning fossil fuel, we're burning coal still here in Texas, unfortunately, and we're also doing nuclear generated power. The reality is, weatherization is going to reduce BTU loads on buildings. So when you reduce the BTU load on a building, that's less fossil fuel needed to generate energy to heat or cool that building. So by definition, weatherization is going to impact positively the reduction of energy production, thus reducing fossil fuel consumption. So that's a big ask. Our buildings generate 40% of our greenhouse gases, and there is an easy way to get, and it's not an expensive way. Weatherization is not an expensive way to address that.
So kind of thinking about different definitions of the word sustainability, I'll start off with sort of the affordability perspective. You know, is it sustainable for me to live in a home if my bill is $300, $400 a month? So clearly weatherization has a great impact in reducing energy burdens, particularly for low-income communities. And so that's something that TEPRI focuses on a lot in terms of, you know, what weatherization interventions can be done to easily reduce people's most pressing need for, you know, getting the bills paid, being able to live comfortably. And then also thinking about quality of life improvements, things like, can I keep my home at a comfortable temperature? Is my home weatherized in the sense where I'm not exposed to mold, I'm not exposed to poor air quality and things like that. But also additionally, you know, weatherization is a pretty critical component in getting homes ready for solar, if that is an intervention that makes sense. And so thinking about energy transitions and access to clean energy, weatherization plays a really important role as a sort of foundation level intervention to get a home in a position where solar would actually be cost effective and beneficial. And then lastly, sort of thinking about systemic resiliency, you know, thinking about summer peak events and extreme times of energy demand, weatherization interventions really help to reduce those peak demand events, particularly if you think about low-income households that may be, you know, in housing conditions that are really sort of disproportionately driving those peak events, not to their fault necessarily, but clearly it's access to different qualities of housing stock in their area in particular, and whether or not they're homeowners and renters. So weatherization not only has benefits at the individual level, but thinking about the system's demand across the board, you know, how can we prevent instances like Winter Storm Uri from the demand side and things like that.
I can only echo what my colleagues already mentioned here, but just to highlight two additional points. When it comes to improving livelihoods and reducing costs, that benefit of cost reduction, reduced utility bills, of energy efficiency is often mentioned. But when all this at the system level gets to a large enough scale, then actually there is a certain market transformation that happens, and I have seen this in many countries. Once the market understands the benefits, which is why what the previous panel was discussing is so critical. How do we get the knowledge out there? How do we raise awareness? Once the market at large understands that these energy efficiency measures mean that you have on the long run lower costs associated with that home, better health for the residents, then they will sell at a higher per square footage price. So the market incorporates that information. And now suddenly you get to the point where in many countries you can see, you look at ads selling apartments or homes, they will mention whether the home has been renovated for energy efficiency, and we have the data and the evidence to show that they sell at a significantly higher per square footage price. So that is, from a resiliency and sustainability perspective, from that financial and economic sustainability perspective, a very critical point. And then the second point I'd like to emphasize is, once again, these kinds of weatherization and energy efficiency efforts get to a scale, the kind of capacity that the previous panel was talking about, like not having enough contractors to do the work, the kinds of contractors that are typically involved in this kind of work are small businesses. So these energy efficiency and weatherization create local jobs very often in small businesses, which we desperately need. If you look at what happened because of the pandemic, small businesses in local communities have struggled tremendously. So there is an additional benefit from a resiliency perspective that energy efficiency supports the small business sector.
Ditto to everything that's already been said. This is a graphic that was produced by Architecture 2030. And as Alan mentioned, buildings are a critical part of our carbon solution. Nearly 40% are attributable to buildings. And weatherization is probably the easiest, fastest, non-sustained thing that you have to do. And what I mean by that is you don't have to re-up every year. Just do it and then move on. And so as far as resilience goes too, weatherization is a critical strategy for maintaining comfort in an enclosed environment when we lose power, and to help keep everything warm and keep the heat in the space, or to keep things cool and shelter us from the sun in the summertime.
Thank you very much. I'd like to kind of piggyback off of one thing that you just said that I think is very fascinating, coming from your economic development background, this idea of job creation. Any of you can hop in on this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit more, because that's something that we don't hear folks talking about very often, with this idea of weatherization being a springboard for job creation. How do you envision that growing and becoming a new sector for job creation? How can we capitalize on that?
Yeah, I think training is critical. And there are a lot of model programs out there. The USGBC local chapter in New York City created a program called G-Pro that was just a trade-focused industry training program. They developed a curriculum to help people understand what the opportunity might be to learn some new skills and then either be self-employed and do this or be a part of a larger organization.
I completely agree with what was said, and I do believe, though, that it is challenging, and that's in part because of this issue of scale, and the small businesses are not going to strategically go into this area until they see significant demand, and very often then demand is not going to materialize until these small businesses are out there marketing. So there is a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, and I was so excited to see so many cities being represented in this room, because in my international experience, it is cities that can kind of connect these two sides, and the cities that can really interfere in this vicious cycle and make sure that these become reinforcing mechanisms. They can bring together all the stakeholders. They can integrate the demand and supply side in such a way where they start building that demand, and they make sure that they bring in the trainers, the training programs, systematically the small businesses, and you need to make sure that these small businesses see some immediate business opportunity. And once you can do that by integrating these different efforts at the city level, then it really helps things take off. At least there are lots of nice examples of that.
Thank you. TEPRI doesn't get involved in workforce development too deeply, but I will say that clearly the availability of weatherization workforce continues to be a barrier for getting work done. And I think any sort of job creation or workforce training program, particularly one that targets the neighborhoods that the interventions will eventually be done, will help to reduce some of the existing barriers and help to even create a higher degree of community trust if the people who are doing the work are representative of that community. So I think there's lots of opportunities to work with local entities to just basically ensure that there's greater access to those educational and workforce opportunities.
I'm connected with Collin College. I'm on the board of advisors for their program for trades education, and there is a really exciting development with regard to their expanding program, and there's a lot of training either through TSTC, which is the Texas State Technical College, and also regional secondary programs in Grand Prairie and Dallas that are really stimulating the awareness with regard to young people who may want to get into a trade versus going an academic route. These are technical, high-paying jobs. If we've observed in the wind generation industry, those are high-paying jobs for maintenance of the wind generation devices throughout the state. We have a huge solar industry that's really expanded. I do have a solar contractor that I work with, and it is, these businesses are interest rate sensitive, and also with regard to economic issues, they can slow down, and as a result of what we're seeing right now with inflation and also interest rates. But on the whole, I was encouraged to see what our representative from Encore was saying earlier with regard to what's happening at the state to lobby and make aware of the PUC to reduce some of the barriers to actually allowing the really the floodgate of need that's out there to actually take part in the program. So to remove some of the bureaucratic barriers to this and understand that the need is not just an individual need, it's a community need to really support. And if the dam is leaking, which is you've got a bunch of houses that are leaking energy, that impacts the entire grid, and that impacts us all. And as we saw when I call it the snowpocalypse when it happened a few years ago, but the reality is that event was a benchmark of how bad it can get if we don't really address issues surrounding the grid. And this, in the demand in the peak months in the summer, the energy case is there that we can dramatically reduce our load by doing some simple weatherization things.
Can you speak a little bit to the responsibility and the role of both the public and the private sector to continue to drive these weatherization initiatives in our state?
You know, I'm a home builder, so I'm going to, we are doing it in the home building business. There are standards, the codes are constantly improving, but one thing, the elephant in the room is the built environment. Existing homes, who people are struggling with high energy bills, there's some simple things that can happen. And I just did a price on OSB plywood versus Tech Shield, a radiant barrier plywood. So one of the simple things communities can do is to, if someone's having, when we have a swath of hailstorms come through the city, everybody's getting a new roof. Insurance company's going to buy it. But if you've got 2,000 square feet of roof, it's going to cost you $620 more to put a radiant barrier plywood layer under your roof than not. And that alone is going to reduce your attic temperatures by a minimum of 20 degrees in the summer. So what that does, when your air conditioning comes on in the summer, you get that puff of hot air that comes through first. That is your attic temperature conducting into the ductwork and there's hot air in the ductwork, so that's got to be flushed out first in order for the cool air from the air conditioner to get into the house. So a radiant barrier, what it does is reduce attic temperatures, and that's a simple thing. All of the things that we're talking about here boil down to the fact that we're not talking a lot of money. To go ahead and blow some additional air insulation, it's not a large number. The thing is, to attract contractors into the business of weatherization. And the repeated statement I heard was there's not enough people doing it. Well, there's a lot of contractors that would look to do this if there was a pathway where they weren't necessarily the rater, the arbiter, and analyst. One of the things that I think could happen if the contractor is not the rater and someone says, okay, you need a radiant barrier, or by rules here, and I'm trying to advocate this in the city of Dallas, if you're going to re-roof and you don't have a radiant barrier, you're going to need to do it. And that requires a permit at that point in time. And many municipalities don't require roof permits to re-roof from it's considered a repair, so it's not a permittable event. That can be something that can be addressed with third-party energy contractors so they don't have to add an additional load to the inspection divisions of these cities. But that's just a simple thing that is not a big number that can be addressed at a municipal level, and that's going to reduce, there's 250,000 single-family homes in Dallas, and I don't know how many roofs get changed in every hailstorm. In the past 15 years, maybe a third of the roofs have been changed. That is a huge carbon reduction event.
Yeah, thank you. I think the state of Texas is at a really interesting time right now. You know, it's one of the fastest growing states from a population perspective. You know, we had this really kind of impactful event 2 years ago with Winter Storm Uri, and I think that has given us all sort of an opportunity to look at our entire energy system and evaluate what opportunities exist to improve it for all Texans. And so I think right now, as the legislature and the Public Utility Commission are sort of considering next steps about what to do in terms of, incentivizing the creation of new power plants and ensuring that the grid is more reliable, there's also this incredible opportunity to take a step back and look at, what can we do from the demand side to reduce energy use in the first place? Because oftentimes the energy you don't use is the cheapest avenue for reliability. And so I think that message can't really get lost in the discussion. And as the Public Utility Commission is also in the process of reviewing its energy efficiency standards, we have the opportunity to say, hey, like Texas was really innovative back in 1999 as the first state to come up with an energy efficiency standard. But in the 20, 30 years since, we've fallen behind other states in terms of what our goals are. So I think there's other opportunities as well to evaluate where we can be as a state in terms of energy use reduction and how that impacts energy affordability, both in the immediate term in terms of reducing energy burden at the household level, but also thinking about the investments that need to be made at the utility scale level, or the additional costs that might come from implementing reliability, and also thinking about the debt that was incurred from Winter Storm Uri that every single one of us in this room are going to be paying off for quite some time. So those are just things that I think are important to think about.
Just to add the piece of data which does not directly answer the question, but we keep mentioning this fact that energy efficiency is more economical. Typically, the cost of 1 megawatt new energy generation can pay for 3 to 5 megawatts reduction. So there is a really big difference. And so it's just, it's a very sensible direction to go in terms of the overall system and the economy. So I just wanted to mention that piece of estimate that's out there. As far as the responsibility of the public versus the private sector, I would like to argue that I think all sectors, including the third sector, has tremendous responsibility. And I think it's really the matter of figuring out who is good at what. Because I find that too often the wrong sectors are trying to do the other one's job. And I'm a big fan of stakeholder gatherings, kind of similar to what's happening in this room, where you very intentionally bring all the key stakeholders together and you have a conversation that's not attacking anybody, but it's just basically, here is a shared problem and how do we tackle it and who can do what and what do we do best. And it seems to work. And I see I have seen something with respect to public sector that I think is really, really powerful. Public sector can aggregate. Public sector can really aggregate the demand, and it typically has better ways of getting the information across. So when we try to raise awareness about the benefits of energy efficiency, that when you put in that insulation and some of these new technologies that are now very affordable, your payback may be 6 months. I mean, the paybacks have become so attractive, but your average consumer does not know that. So who are they going to trust? I completely agree with Ellen that if it's the contractor advocating for it, I mean, he has a conflict of interest, right? So your sensible customers are not necessarily going to believe that. And on the previous panel, somebody else mentioned the trust issue, that when these elderly people are being promised these energy efficiency improvements, that very often they don't trust the source of this information. So we need to think critically about who is it in the ecosystem that customers will actually trust. And again, you all are the best judges of that in your own communities, but I can just say that, for example, Vilnius in Lithuania has done a really good, cool program back 20 years ago, where it was the city of Vilnius that put a model building in the midst of a low-income community. It was near a bus station, but again, it's very specific to the locality. Everybody takes public transportation there. And so they literally built, probably with the help of some really innovative architects, this tiny little home in an area that got a lot of foot traffic. The kids were immediately drawn to it because you could go in and you could press buttons. But this little demonstration home was all about energy efficiency in a highly interactive, really, really fun way. And it was sponsored by the city of Vilnius, so the people actually trusted the information that they saw. And that, believe it or not, something that simple actually created an exponential demand in that neighborhood for the energy efficiency program that, like many of you, they already had in place. It was just not being utilized to the point that it could have been. So just a little anecdote.
Yeah, that's such a great example because I think the person that's delivering the message is oftentimes more important than the message that's coming out of the person's mouth in terms of how people perceive it. I'm going to guess that each of you here in the room, because you voted with your feet today and decided to spend your morning talking about weatherization, is a sustainability advocate, right? That you have a personal code of ethics or values that cause you to make lifestyle choices for yourself every single day. Well, that's your footprint, and that is, the impact of one individual, or maybe you have control and influence over your family, so maybe 4, 6, 8 people, right? But you hold the power of the pen in your hand. And through legislation and policy, you're able to make a far bigger impact through your handprint. And when we change codes, when we change regulations, when we modify the baseline expectation of what is the right thing to do, the tide goes up and all the boats rise. And that has so much larger of an impact than any individual could have by deciding they're going to be a vegetarian or they're going to take less airplane flights, right? Like, again, buildings are critical to a part of this solution. And if we're able to just make a small change, that loosens things up for even bigger changes. And as we've said so many times, weatherization is the first barrier that we have to clear, or the first hurdle, the first rock in the jar to help us move towards these collective goals.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for the panel? Well, thank you very much. This has been a great discussion. I appreciate your time and your expertise today.
All right, thank you again. Is this working? Okay. All right, thank you again to all of our panelists today. So now we're going to jump into a little bit of information on some funding and assistance opportunities that are available at the federal level for weatherization assistance programs for community initiatives around sustainability and energy efficiency. And I will turn it over to my colleague Garrett, also at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. He's an air quality planner in our transportation department to talk a little bit more about those opportunities. Oh, yes, and also for everyone's information, all of these slides from our event today will be posted online and sent out in an email if you registered, and also, you may have noticed, we are recording this event. That video will be posted to our YouTube page, and a link to that will also be available in the follow-up email and online.
All right, we do have a few programs we want to tell you all about. You might already be aware of these because we've sent out some notices, but the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program, that is a program offered by the Department of Energy. It is now open. It's allocated funding for local governments in the region. This funding can be used for a variety of projects related to energy efficiency and conservation. That includes electric vehicles for fleets and electric vehicle infrastructure. If your entity has been allocated funding, all you have to do is apply to get the funding. There's also a voucher option available. that really reduces the administrative work required with grant applications. The free preliminary energy assessments offered by the State Energy Conservation Office would be a good place to start if your entity is eligible for the EECBG funding. The preliminary energy assessment provides information and suggestions on way to improve energy efficiency at your facilities. This is a free program, so if you're interested, all you have to do is go to SECO's website and apply for the preliminary energy assessment. That is available to any public entities in the state of Texas. Real quick, while we were talking about SECO, I do want to remind everybody, if your entity is located in a non-attainment county, a county designated as non-attainment for the pollutant ozone, you are required to submit local government energy reporting annually. That is due tomorrow. If you have any questions about energy reporting, you can email me or find me and I can help you out. Another opportunity we want to tell you all about is the climate pollution reduction grants from the EPA. The EPA will provide $250 million in grants for the creation of climate plans and $4.6 billion in implementation grants with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollutants. If your entity is interested, you must provide the EPA with a notice of intent to participate by March 31st. And then a couple upcoming events and meetings that we're holding. We'll host Encore's Clean Fleet Partnership Program webinar at NCTCOG offices. That will be on Wednesday, March 22nd from 1 to 2:30. You are welcome to sign up RSVP at the link provided in the slides. We'll also be hosting a stakeholder session for those involved in workforce development in the electric vehicle industry on Monday, March 20th from 1 to 2:30 at NCTCOG offices and via Zoom.
Okay, and then another program that we host as part of the Council of Governments is our Clyde Awards. These are Celebrating Leadership in Development Excellence Awards that are awarded every 2 years to planning projects throughout the region that exemplify the leadership and development excellence principles. So the application deadline for those award nominations has been extended to March 10th. So we'll talk a little bit about eligible projects. But like I mentioned, the Clyde Awards honor development and planning projects that exemplify the region's principles of development excellence, which outline a vision for sustainable, livable communities in North Texas. The COG is looking for projects and programs in North Texas that exemplify these principles. And you can learn more about how to apply at developmentexcellence.com. So there are several categories for submittal for projects to be nominated for these awards. These categories include new development projects, redevelopment, special development, projects focused on raising public awareness, and public policy and planning projects. So as I mentioned again, the deadline for nominations for awards is March 10th, and you can learn more at developmentexcellence.com. Last couple of things, if you're interested in learning more about anything that the COG does or any of the programs that Garrett and I have shared with you today, you can learn more at these websites. Again, these links will be included in the slides that will be sent out after the meeting. You can sign up to our email lists to stay informed on upcoming events such as this one, and also view our committee pages if you're interested in getting more involved in RISE or in any of our environment development or Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities work. Here's my contact information as well as Garrett's. I have business cards over on the table over there as well if you want to get in contact with me about anything that you thought of during the meeting today or any questions that you may have. And with that, we're a little ahead of schedule. I think obviously our lunch is not here yet, so we'll just kind of hang out, feel free to mingle, grab more water, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. And then whenever that arrives, we will break for lunch. And then after everyone's kind of grabbed their food and settled, we'll have a lunchtime keynote presentation from Far Andrews and Rosa Cicernos from the City of Dallas on the Dallas Whole Home Program. But with that, thank you all for coming to our workshop today. Like I said, I've been Breanne Johnson, and thank you, and enjoy your lunch.
When you own a house, your priority is to protect your whole home investment and your family's well-being. No matter where you live, climate change has led to an increase in both the frequency and severity of extreme weather events. Consider the storms, floods, heat waves, and cooler temperatures we've been experiencing in Dallas. These extreme weather shifts make residential structures vulnerable by impacting their stability and condition. This may affect a home's safety, thermal comfort, energy consumption, utility costs, and the environment. A safe and healthy home is essential for all people. Yet it is even more crucial for children, the elderly, and people with chronic illnesses, because their health is greatly affected by their living conditions. The good news is that the City of Dallas can help make your home healthier and more resilient with the Whole Home Dallas program. Whole Home Dallas is designed to educate and facilitate access to resources that can help with weatherization, energy efficiency, and renewable energy opportunities. Resources include programs that can weatherize your home to keep the outside elements out, can make your home more energy efficient, and can provide renewable energy options. These home improvements can help lower utility costs and use fewer natural resources. Many financial assistance programs, rebates, and tax incentives are available to Dallas residents. Some programs may be free if you qualify. Visit wholehomedallas.com today to learn more.
Okay, thank you. So, good afternoon. I think it's afternoon. That video was just kind of a primer for our brand new program, Whole Home Dallas, which I'm very excited about introducing to you guys today. I'm Far Andrews. I'm the Senior Climate Coordinator here at the City of Dallas, and I'm joined by Rosa Cisneros, who's our Climate Coordinator. We're in the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability for the City of Dallas. Okay, so today's presentation, I really want to focus on the purpose of the Whole Home program, well, how this came together at the City of Dallas, and then we want to walk you through some of the elements in our resource hub that's related to weatherization, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. Talk a little bit about some of our success metrics, and then I know lunch is being set up, so we'll try to be as quick as we can, and we'll also be available for questions on this program. So the Whole Home Dallas program was really codified in a number of different city plans, and it's kind of amplified in our city's core values. Whole Home Dallas is really pulled out of our CCAP plan. And this is our city's comprehensive environmental and climate action plan. There are 8 different goals in this plan, and this program pulls from 2 different goals. Most readily from goal number 1, which is Dallas's buildings are energy efficient and climate resilient. We also have 4 actions in our current work plan related to Whole Home Dallas. And it also pulls from our second goal, which Dallas generates and uses renewable, reliable, and affordable energy. So lots of connections to existing plans. So one of the things that you've heard echoed through the conversations today was talk about how Dallas residents are, along with the rest of the country, experiencing extreme weather as a result of climate change. So the Whole Home Dallas resource was really pulled together to help meet a couple of needs in our community. One of them was to help reduce energy burden for our low-income residents, protect health because poorly weatherized home definitely has an impact on health and comfort and safety, and also bring together and fill this gap that was mentioned a few times today. And I was really happy it was mentioned today because this was a big factor in why this program was launched. There's a void in letting people know that these services are available, and these services can be free in most cases. I think one of our panelists said, this is the best kept secret, which is true. So what we're hoping to do with this program, not only is it a website, but it's also a media campaign. So we're letting residents know that Encore has services, that Atmos has services, that Dallas County has services, so that our low-income residents will have another voice saying that there are these services, they are free, and here's how you take advantage of those. So climate change is affecting everyone, but not everyone equally. We had a lot of conversations today about our vulnerable communities and how programs that exist can help them. And really this program, Whole Home Dallas, is meant to connect our lower income residents with these services. When we were launching this program, there was a lot of stakeholder input. We met with service providers, we met with the community, we met with other municipalities, and we tried to figure out, okay, how do we help bridge this gap? How do we help residents take advantage of this funding? How do we not leave funding on the table at the end of the fiscal year that could have gone to a better use? So what I like to do now is really turn it over to my coworker, Rosa, so she can walk you through the resources on the hub, and you can get an idea of the user experience that the residents walk through when they come to our website.
Thank you, Far. Oh, a little too close. So with those equity and environmental concerns that Far mentioned, we kept those in mind whenever we created the content and the material that was going to be on our Whole Home Dallas website. And we kind of narrowed down on two main goals. The first one would be like educating the Dallas residents of the different household upgrades that they can implement, and then connecting them to the different existing programs that are available to them too. So with the education portion, we figured that, hey, if we let them know that caulking can potentially reduce heating and cooling costs by 20%, like it provides more of a more appealing for them to actually implement these. And then with connecting them to available programs, we've gotten some feedback that residents have to navigate through multiple pages, seeing that different programs have their own individual applications and different requirements and qualifications. So instead of having to navigate, they can visit the Whole Home Dallas and see our one-stop, we call it the one-stop resource hub, where they can find most of the different programs that are available to them. And they're categorized by income-based assistance, rebates and discounts, and tax incentives. So the first one that we narrowed in on is weatherization, and as far as the educational portion, we want to let them know of the benefits of keeping the indoor conditions of a home in and the outdoor elements out, and how that can improve the home's comfort. And then we kind of highlight some of the key upgrades that they can implement, like caulking, weather stripping, and adding insulation. And some of these they can even do themselves too. But for the other more like labor intensive and more expensive upgrades, that's where they can visit down to the resource hub towards the bottom of the website. And for weatherization, seeing that the Dallas County is one of our primary administrators of the WAP funds, for sure we made sure to include them in the resource hub. And some other tax credits are for like insulation, where they can receive a tax credit of 10% of the cost or up to $500. And we will also provide the description of what type of insulation they can use this tax credit on. So with energy efficiency, our second point of interest is letting them know that there is a way to use less energy to get the same job done, which is one of the similar concepts that we've been listening to today of how to lower those utility costs for people. They can look through Energy Star appliances or Energy Star LED light bulbs. And some programs available for them is the HERA, or the High Efficient Electric Home Rebate Act. And that can provide some consumer rebates to low and moderate income households. And qualifying projects under the HERA include electric stoves, heat pumps for clothes dryers, and heat pumps for HVAC systems. And I think Carl from Encore asked us a while ago if we visit the Encore website, and for Dallas, that is absolutely yes, because we've visited their website and they have a lot of great programs, and we've included them in the one-stop resource hub too. One of them is the Encore's retail product program, where you can visit and get like an in-store discount code for different products that are smart thermostats, air purifiers, and room air conditioners. I visited it myself, and I did see one that's like a $65 discount on smart thermostats like the Ecobees and the Google Nests. And our last point of interest is renewable energy. We know that renewable energy is derived from like natural resources, and it's replenished at a higher rate than they are consumed. So although this might not be so DIY upgrades that they can do themselves, we kind of wanted to narrow in on different upgrades that they can include in their home. That can be like applying to renewable electricity plants, solar panels, maybe even a solar powered generator, and then the solar powered water heaters that are becoming quite common. Some different programs that are available. Again, it's an Encore program, the Encore Residential Solar Program. And in our listings, we try to be as descriptive as possible. We understand that sometimes for programs, they only receive applications for a certain amount of time throughout the year, certain periods. So, for example, the Encore Residential Solar Program accepts applications from January through November, so that way it can facilitate and ease that step for the residents that are trying to find the different programs. And other tax credits are the solar investment tax credit of 30%, and then also letting residents know that there's a property tax exemption that allows 100% of exemption on the increased value of your home. And that summarizes what we can feature on our webpage, and I'll turn it back to Far.
Great, thank you. So that was just a little bit of what you can expect when you visit the Whole Home Dallas website. I think the overarching idea is that we were trying to consolidate all of these incentives in one place for our residents, instead of them spending an enormous amount of time visiting 10 or 15 different websites and combing through various requirements. This could ease that burden and help them get connected to the services a lot faster. So that There are a couple metrics, success metrics that's attached to Whole Home Dallas. One of them that Rosa mentioned earlier is that we really want to raise awareness that these programs are out there. So we're going to be counting web visits, we're going to be counting time spent on the website, and then we're going to be counting click-throughs. So as people go to the resource hub, they can click from that resource and be connected directly to the service provider's page. So we want to, count the click-throughs so that we can see how many people are actually taking action and how many people are being redirected, and kind of be able to gauge the level of interest there. And then this is not just a resource hub or an educational series. It's also going to be a huge campaign. So we're going to be sending out on social media. We'll be doing likes. We'll be doing on-site visits. We've already gotten invitations to visit different neighborhood associations. This is just a really good tool in our toolbox. We've also been leveraging other city departments to help with this outreach, like our code enforcement officers. We're going to be doing training for them because they're kind of boots on the ground, and they go out to homes in different communities that could benefit from these services, and now they have a singular place to send them, a resource where they can find assistance that's up to date and accurate. We've also been working with our 311 group because they get calls in all the time, like, how can I get some help with this? And now they have a resource that they can direct residents to. Also, our Welcoming Communities group. So there's just a number of different departments that are really excited about having this tool aggregated in one place. I guess our big metric here is related to making sure that we keep promoting this so that we're seeing a 2% increase in web visits over previous months, and that we're really hitting those high priority zip codes that have been identified by our equity team with outreach on this topic. I think that might have been the last one. Yep, that was the last one. So open for questions on Whole Home Dallas.
Do you have a list of the zip codes that you're targeting?
We do, and it's actually posted on not our website, but our equity team's website. I can get that for you. They've done an equity assessment, and we're also going to be updating that by adding an environmental justice layer to it. But there are like 22 zip codes that we are focusing on primarily. But as you saw from the presentation Rosa did, there are resources in here that can benefit people from all income levels because there are tax incentives for those major purchases. There's discounts that you can get at the register in addition to the income-based incentives. So something for everybody. That's a question.
Yeah, what's been the most effective way to get the message out and get people to use the tool?
So when the program launched, we did a press conference, and I guess it was just the perfect storm, pun intended. It was right after the last cold snap. It was the Monday after. Weatherization was kind of top of mind. At first I thought a Monday press conference, no one's going to show. We had like 12 news outlets. So we got a lot of earned media, and then we got a lot of secondary stories where press interviewed like administrators and service providers. And then it went out into the community and talked to people who have received services and were able to attest to the utility bill savings and their added level of comfort. So I think a lot of this, and I know Eva, she's amazing, but she talked about trust and how you have to have, how the community has to trust the voice that the message is coming from. I think a lot of this builds on word of mouth. The more people that receive these services and we can capture those best practices and tell that story, I think the more interest we'll be able to garner in this program.
Are you already taking advantage of the DART advertising that they offer for their transit assistance?
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of whole home advertising. I mean, we launched at the beginning of February, I think February 6th. And we're going to do DART ads, we're going to do billboards. I think something that's going to be really effective is we're going to put ads in Nextdoor and in utility bills. I think leveraging other resources, other departments and their networks, and also other organizations and service providers. So this is a message that a lot of people can amplify, because the tools in this toolkit help bring everyone's message to the public that they're trying to get out there. Any more questions, or you all just hungry? Okay, we'll be here. Oh.
It's just a comment. I just want to say this is great. I think this is really going to be very helpful to a lot of people, and so I'm glad you did it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I'll answer questions.
Thank you. Okay, thank you guys.